guys. Welcome to episode 46 of the podcast. It's season 2, episode 6. Is that right? I think I did the math right.
Episode 5. I think it's N-1 because episode 40 was the end of season 1, right?
Okay.
So it starts on 41. 2, 3.
1. It's funny. I don't know this. 1, 2.
No, it's 6.
4,
I don't know.
5, 6. All right. Anyways, what are we going to talk about today, Steven? Today's, I think, the Friday afternoon feeling, end of the work week. I guess I definitely want to check in on how it's going with your fight camp. Another week down. How are things going on your end for that?
It's been good, man. Can you believe it? I only have 2 weeks of training left. 2 weeks of training left. It's fucking ridiculous, dude. Fucking ridiculous. But
feels like it went by fast.
It went by so fast. And my camp was longer. Usually you do like a 5 to 6 week camp. I did an 8-week one. So, no, I feel good, man. Lots of questions that will be put to rest, I think, in this fight. I think that's one way I like of framing a fight camp or a fight is that, you know how you always have questions about yourself? A fight puts a lot of them to rest, I think. Now, interestingly, there are also fights and experiences that do spawn more questions. And so those are the ones that are very puzzling to you and kind of throw you for a loop. But I would say more or less fights, they collapse your matrix of uncertainty, right? You start to, know yourself more coming out of a fight. And so that's been good. I would say that's been tracking pretty well. I feel fit. Go ahead.
What do you mean when you say you know yourself more?
Well, you know how you deal with fear, right? You know how you deal with pressure. And the pressure, I'm not even just talking about fight pressure, right? Of course, you learn a lot about how you deal with pressure within a fight but knowing that you have a fight, whenever things come up in your regular life, you have to ask yourself, is this bullshit? Your ability to sift, we all have the ability, here's the funny thing, right? One diagnosis of people as a whole is that we're all surrounded by bullshit. And life is just an act of clearing out bullshit, your own bullshit and other people's bullshit. And, I'm optimistic and I think that everyone actually knows their bullshit. Everyone has a pretty good bullshit compass, but we kind of make excuses for ourselves, right? And when you're in a fight camp, you just get really good at sorting out bullshit. Okay, some guy cuts you off in traffic. I think we're going to use that example a lot in this podcast, right? Because road rage is a big one. But is that bullshit? You getting upset, is that bullshit or not? Yes, of course it's bullshit for you to get upset, right? So I think that's one. Obviously you have to be also in your physical prime. So you have to be on top of your sleep, your food, everything. And so you learn so much more about yourself, right? Because one thing that came out of this camp for me too was I was adjusting my diet and my caloric intake. And I think it's funny how for most people, because of the privileges of modern society, we can no longer, say, for example, trust our hunger cues, right? We just don't trust it. Usually we're just bored or what have you. But I kind of tapped back into my intuition this fight camp where I was like, all right, I'm hungry. I'm this exact amount of hungry. And it feels like I need more salt. Or God, I really want a fruit right now. Fruit is what I need because I'm at this level of lightness. I feel, because you feel light or heavy sometimes in your kind of gut, right? So I'm like, all right, so I'm X amount of hours away from my training. I'm this amount of lightness, and I've eaten this much, and kind of just trusting my intuition to be like, this is what I want to eat, while still losing weight. So I'm already down 6 pounds since I started this fight camp. You got to be able to lose like about 1 pound or 1.5 pounds each week. That's a realistic, way to go about it. And being able to accomplish that without tracking calories or macros or meal prepping or anything, and just using pure intuition, you know more about yourself, right? So, yeah.
I've always been an intuitive eater. I don't think I've ever counted calories in my entire life. Maybe at the very beginning when I first started, like, I guess like lifting weights, and you know how everyone's like, hey, you gotta eat this much protein and eat this much, like, in terms of macros. I think maybe I tried it for maybe like a week or two, and I was like, all right, this is bullshit. I'm not, eating's not a math problem. But then I started to understand generally how much I should be eating within those first couple of weeks, and then I started understanding, okay, well, this I guess like this chicken breast is probably about 100 calories. And it probably has 25 grams of protein. So I need to eat, something equivalent to like, I don't know, 5 of these a day or something like that. And then I work backwards from there. But in my head, it's not like zero math, but it's definitely not like I need a calculator for this math either. It's shit I can just do in my head. I think I relate to when you say sometimes I wake up and then I'm like, fuck, I need to drink some coconut water or something like that has that type of taste or whatever the it's like I need to eat a fruit right now.
Yeah.
And I always trust those, like as long as it's not like, yo, I need to eat like a Snickers bar. Then,
Yeah.
But it's something that's like, okay, like something that's natural, like a fruit or like something salty. I always trust those because I'm like, okay, there's probably something going on here, and usually I don't reach for like, if it's salty, I'm not gonna go for a bag of chips if I'm. But yeah, I think trusting like those signals, or like starting to understand those about yourself, understanding like how much fuel you need to do the thing you want to do. Like if I'm about to go play a basketball game, and I'm walking into that, I could pretty much tell, okay, if I don't eat anything before this game, then I'm gonna die.
Yeah, man. We all start from different places, but I think that the end goal is always the same. And there is a difference between like eating enough to thrive in normal life versus like, let's say you got a football tournament or something very like very high level. So yeah, and I think that that's one. Maybe we could abstract that point out to everything, right? Like the goal of the method and any method is to get you to a point where you develop an intuition about yourself and what you need. Because I mean, humans are so personalized, I had a big revelation this week too in this fight camp, which is that I don't know why it took me this long to figure this out, Hack. I have no idea why, but I have never been someone who follows the rule to a T, ever. And I've never been able to go through a curriculum as it was written by a teacher. I always had to learn my own way, study my own way, figure it out. Sometimes I involved cheating if it was too boring or I couldn't be bothered. And it extends now even to fighting, right? Where let's say, someone tries to tell you that, hey, you got to study for this test. And okay, cool. Right. Maybe you can like cast that aside, be like, whatever. But when it comes to fighting and your coach says you have to do exactly this routine, it's different to tell yourself, I'm going to bend the rules a little bit on this or that. Right. It's totally different. But then for this fight camp, that's actually what I've been doing. Like I've been listening to my body more and be like, you know what? I'm actually not going to do this. Which has been an interesting departure because I would say that prior in my career, I was very much David Goggins style. I was like, fuck it. Like I'm supposed to do that many of that thing. Nothing's going to stop me from like checking it off. Like it's binary. Either I succeeded, I did 200 of that thing, or I did none of it, you know? And so maybe you fast forward to the fight, and I don't do that well, and we'll go back to this moment. But yeah, in this fight camp, I listened to my body. There were a couple of moments where I was like, you know what, I'm not going on a run today. Like I'm not feeling it, and that's a scary thing. That's a scary amount of trust to put in yourself, right? Back to the intuitive stuff, because you're going off the structure of you're trusting yourself, like. That, hey, I've already done the crazy amount of training. I know what it's like. And you know what? I'm going to try not doing it exactly that way this time.
You think this is a positive or negative departure?
I don't know. So, yeah, I don't know yet. So at this moment, it feels very positive. I feel very confident in it. I feel very good. I hope that it translates to being much more loose and fluid in the ring, you know, like be like water, the Bruce Lee quote, you know, like in the Taoism, like the art of non-doing. I hope it's more towards flow state and not towards, you know, giving myself an out or not doing the work. So, and that's why, like going back to the original point, that's why fighting is so interesting, because it answers all these questions for me, right? Like I will either see if this works or doesn't work. And I'll have an answer instead of wondering like, this whole time, you know?
Okay. So, I'm gonna try to, I feel like this is a natural transition. Because this week I've been trying for the first time in my life to set quarterly goals. Quarter is, you know, the quarter just came up. I mean, we're a week into the quarter, so I think I'm still within the realm of it's not too late to set goals for the next 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never done that before. And I think in the past I've probably mentioned to you, or maybe even on this pod, that I didn't really like New Year's resolutions because it's like too far out. Like I could probably never stick to something for a year. I mean, I probably could have. I really tried, but I don't know. They've never worked out for me because it's too far out. I do like weekly goals because it feels like 7 days is just a long enough chunk that you can actually work towards something and make a difference, but not so long that if you mess it up, you don't get another shot like right away. You know, so it's more like the fact that you can iterate, hey, like this is my 7-day goal. At the end of that 7 days, oh, this is what I was able to do. This is what I wasn't able to do. Let's set some new goals based on that. So I really like weekly goals because of that. But quarterly goals I've never done before, and they're kind of, I mean, 90 days is not that long, but it's not that short either. You know what I mean? It's not a year, but like if you could stick to something for 90 days, you could probably get a whole lot of shit done. You can definitely get some compounding effects of whatever small habit that you're doing if you do it for 90 days. So to me, that's like intriguing. And our friend Billy, that we went to the retreat with, he actually set like a year-long goal, and then he has quarters to break them down. He showed me his whole system when I caught up with him last week. And so that's what intrigued me actually. And with him, the way he broke down his goals was like super cool. Like, and he just uses like a simple spreadsheet, and then he has like these 3 main goals. And I'm sure, like, you know, you've probably worked with OKRs before. You know what they are through your work. So like he almost breaks them down almost like they're OKRs. He has like 3 overarching goals, then he breaks them down into, okay, these are the initiatives I need to do to hit these goals, and then these are the results I expect to get. But obviously with OKRs, it stands for objectives and key results. Like with companies, when they set these big goals, they oftentimes will try to make them sorry, I'm using jargon here, and you might understand because of your line of work, but other people might not. But they try to make the goals SMART, and I don't remember what that stands for, but I think it's specific, measurable, attainable. I don't know what the R is. Maybe something whatever, and I don't know what the T is either. But basically, like you can't have the goal be obscure, otherwise it's not going to be clear whether or not you hit it. And one of the ways to do that is you create this structure where it's black and white whether or not you did what you needed to do for that initiative. A lot of times that has to do with metrics. For instance, I think Billy is trying to, let's say, write a book by the end of the quarter. So his, like on his spreadsheet, he has it broken down by weeks, and he's like, every single day I have to write 3 pages. Doesn't matter, just 3 pages every single day. And then by the end of the week, I'll have, 21 pages or whatever. By the end of the quarter, I'll have this many pages, which equals a book. So he broke it down in a manner where like the goal is very measurable. It's very clear if he hit, his weekly goal of 3 pages a day. Like you either did it or you didn't do it. And I've never been that structured. I've never been that disciplined. And I assume that you set the structure there because some days you're not going to want to do it. Some days you're going to be like, fuck it, I'm not going to write. Like, I don't feel like it. But I think people that are more disciplined, like let's say like a David Goggins would be like, like you were saying, like you'd be like, fuck it. I'm David Goggins. I don't care if I don't want to run 100 miles right now. I'm going to make my body do it. That's obviously a super extreme example. So, but yeah, so I've been thinking about my personal goals. I've been thinking about like, how structured they should be. Like, once I decide, hey, this is a goal I want, and I work backwards. Okay, in order to get that goal, what do I need to do? And if the what do I need to do can be broken down into like very clear, like, all right, this is what I need to do today. This is what I need to do tomorrow. This is what I need to do the next day. And then it's very clear whether or not I did it. Then I don't know. That's how Billy had it set up. And I think company OKRs, they try to do it in that manner too. Like you don't talk about like, let's say you wanted to get $10,000 in revenue, right? You wouldn't set the goal to get $10,000 in revenue. That's not a great goal. What you would do is you would say, okay, how many sales calls do I need to get this revenue? Let's say on average, you convert 1 out of 10 sales calls or something, and each sales call is worth $1,000. So then you would say, okay, so I need to do probably 100 sales calls. So the goal would be still $10,000 in revenue, but to make it more clear, you would say, I need to do 100 sales calls. And maybe you say, okay, so that's 10 sales calls a day for 10 days. You know what I mean? And then you discipline yourself to do the thing that you kind of planned out, even on days when you don't want to do it. And ideally, if everything goes according to plan, then by the end of 10 days, you have your goal. So when you were talking about, I guess like the loose structure that you have around fighting, and in the beginning, of your career, you would just be like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I don't feel like doing it, but I'm going to do it because that's what coach told me to do, and I'm going to get it done. And then now, like, obviously you're a little bit more seasoned, and you kind of know probably why that structure was there in the first place. And so you can kind of like start playing around with that structure to fit yourself, where it's kind of like, okay, now I understood the reason he wanted me to do like 1,000 kicks or whatever was so that, my kicks can feel this way. So I don't have to think about it. But now you know how to get yourself to feel that way without doing the discipline thing. So how far can you go away from that structure was the question that you asked. And so that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about that. Because I mean, this week I've been trying to think about my quarterly goals, and I've never been good at that. So I think the structure would help someone like me, depending on like what I'm trying to do. But it's interesting to see that you're further down the line and you're like, okay, it's not like the structure is hindering you, but you kind of like know what's optimal to hit that goal, if that makes sense.
Right. Exactly. There's a quote that I love. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it's commonly attributed to Pablo Picasso, even though I think that's up in the air whether or not he actually said it. But it's learn the rules like a professional so you can break them like an artist. Right. And just going back to the fighting example, it's so true, right? In your first year of fighting, the one thing you're going to hear from your coach over and over is keep your hands up, keep your hands up, keep your hands up, right? Like it's very important to have that defense, right? Keep your hands up, right? But then you watch all the pro fighters, a year on, you start to realize, well, keeping your hands up is really good. You're defensively sound, but what are you sacrificing when you keep your hands up, right? You're sacrificing your vision, right? Look, I'm covering my own eyes, right? You're sacrificing your mobility because now I have this rigid structure that I need to keep on the top of my frame, right? And so then when you look at these like really pro fighters, they break all these rules. They keep their hands down, right? They punch and this hand's not covered. They keep it down for all sorts of reasons that, like, until you've gotten to that point, there's no way you'll understand what they are actually doing and how they're breaking that rule in order to get the gains somewhere else, right? Because they trust their vision now, so they're going to use their eyes as defense, and they're going to use their head movement instead of just blocking. If their arm is down low, if your arm is low, you can actually kick so much better versus if they're high. So, yeah, man, I think that's like, if we were to break it down, like there's phases, right? There's phase learning. There's phases in habit formation and creation. And you do have to start with the most atomic, I use that word on purpose, atomic habits, with repetition. But once you, I think, break through to the next level and next plateau, you have to be able to undo all that stuff that that rigidity that got you to where you were, in order to level up. So very cool, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it leads back to understanding why the structure exists in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If the why behind the structure of like, hey, this is what I need to do is to get you to this point. But let's say you're the one that built that structure and you understand how you built it and why you built it. And then you see like a shorter, or better, I wouldn't call it a shortcut, but like a better method that doesn't involve that structure. Should you break the structure? And the answer is, I would say probably yes, based on, but also like you're saying that it could be a dangerous, it could be a dangerous thing to do in the sense that, like, I don't know, like, you know what I'm trying to say? It's like the structure had worked, but now that you're so good that you don't need the structure was there for a reason. And so it's kind of like you're playing between, like, okay, I'm going to test something new here. Like, let's put my hands down so I can see. I might get smacked in the face, but at the same time, like, if I could see better, and I could just move my head to dodge punches, I could kick harder too. And then so it's kind of like, and obviously it's an interesting place to be in because, like, I've never been as structured, so I think more structure would help me. But I just really like being unstructured. It's just like nice to not have to do something, But
yeah, but I mean that goes back down to the importance of having a goal, though, right? Because I would say that I was very much like you, and am very much like you, right? Like the things I achieved were only because I was naturally interested in it, and I just went down that rabbit hole and it never stopped. But for the things that I wasn't naturally interested in, there was no getting me on a structure unless there was a goal to that made the boring routine stuff meaningful. And so I think the importance of a goal there is can't be understated. But one thing I wanted to mention as you were talking, made me think about it, is another thing that's interesting in my own self-reflection is that I've always presented as someone who tried to find other ways of doing things and new ways of doing things, right? And questioned the ways that things were being done. That's how I present, that's the way I am at work. Like sometimes I'm sure my colleagues would be like, just shut the fuck up and can we just do it the way we've been doing it? But I think that in terms of my professional development, or what makes, I would say, what I bring to the table unique is what you just said, which is you cannot take for granted why, like the system that you're going into and why things are there, right? Like this is the way we've always been doing things, and that's like a very important thing. And I think that when you look at groups of people, you always have to ask yourself where are they at on that continuum? Like, and I think it's cyclical, right? Whether you're talking about a society, a business, a family, yourself, whatever, right? There's a state where there was a stimulus that occurred in the environment that needed to be addressed, right? So then we applied this thing. And because the stimulus was unknown and came out of nowhere, the thing that we applied was as good as it was like a Band-Aid, right? It was something to like tide us over, and the strength of something ad hoc and haphazard, right? Because the strength of something like that is not because it's a really great, elegant solution. The strength of it is that it's fast and that we do it over and over. We keep it there and we don't move it, because while that thing is there, this unknown stimulus is held at bay. And so for someone who wasn't a part of that coming in, they'll look at this thing and they'll be like, man, this is such a shitty ass fucking thing. And you guys do this every day and everyone does it, right? But for the people who are like there, they're like, no, don't touch that thing. That thing is like very important. It's like keeping this entire thing from, like, we went through it, okay? You know? So there's a time and place, right? Like as you scale up, right? The people that you start a company with are not the same people that will scale it and keep it going and maintain it and multiply it. But I think it's a very interesting topic on what is the update mechanism in any system, right? It probably all comes down to that. So
yeah, when you're talking about like systems and like the processes within the system that get developed over time, and I mean, obviously, I have restaurants, and we used to be like all the way in the trenches day to day, and there's a lot of different processes that are required from many different people in order to keep the restaurant running. You imagine you have like for a full service restaurant, you got like 40 people under one roof, like, like keeping this thing like running on a day-to-day basis, and you're dealing with not just the people within the store, but then customers and then suppliers, landlords, like all this stuff. And there's a lot of different entities here, and the only thing that kind of keeps it running is like kind of like somebody that can see the entire structure of the whole. The general manager, the operator, can see the entire structure of how everything fits together. And over time, when we were in the stores, at first there might not have been a system to do this thing. And then we realized, okay, well, this thing is important and we're doing it, but we're super inefficient. So we created the system. Let's call it like in the beginning, we didn't have any checklists, right? We didn't use checklists. It was just whatever. When you close out the shift, you just, clean up however you think, and then you leave. Obviously, standards between people are different. There's an efficient way to do it, and there's an inefficient way to do it, so on and so forth. So we're like, you know what? If we had a checklist, and then we train everyone on how to do the checklist, we can make this consistent, and they can do it in like 30 minutes rather than taking an hour and a half, and it still wouldn't be clean. And then so we instituted this checklist system. And then obviously, as ourselves in the store, when we institute this checklist system, we're like, man, can you imagine what it was like before we had checklists? Oh yeah, I could imagine that because I was there. We would spend an hour and a half cleaning this thing, and it would still be, inconsistent between the shifts. You show up the next morning and stuff isn't ready, so you can't open it. Just all sorts of bullshit you have to deal with. And you're like, this checklist system is great. Now we can spend 30 minutes and anyone in the restaurant can do it. And then you don't even have any issues because as long as we stay on top of the people doing the checklist, and if they get it wrong, then we just, correct them on the spot. Like, we're saving an hour every single day, and it's higher quality work. But then what ends up happening is, 2 or 3 generations removed, let's say you train your general manager how to use the checklist, and they do it because you taught them how to do it. But then let's say that general manager leaves and you put the next one in, and they weren't there to see what was going on before you had this checklist system. So then, like, somebody leaves the store without doing the checklist, or maybe they do like 2/3 of the checklist and then they feel like doing the rest. And the general manager is like, oh, yeah, it's cool, dude. Like, I like you, so you can go. Next thing you know, a bunch of other people aren't doing the checklist. Next thing you know, the standards drop off. Next thing you know, the reason that the checklist was there in the first place, because they didn't understand that reason in terms of like what was happening before that. They didn't have to deal with the issues that were arising before we had a checklist. They didn't know like the why behind the checklist. And so the system you left didn't work because, you know what I'm trying to say? So I think it's similar to your example when you're talking about taking a system for granted.
Yeah.
And
right.
And yeah, so I see that shit all the time within the stores, because that's what stores are. They're systems, and we put them in place for a reason. But if you weren't there when we were trying to solve this thing, now you don't know. And then so when you carry it out in a half-assed manner, it doesn't work, and you don't understand, why it was there in the first place.
Yeah, man. And that's why I think if you really consider yourself like someone who wants to be a change agent, right, and helps to innovate and helps make things better in the world, and I would hope that everyone, you need people of all sorts, right? Some people hold it down, and some people try to disrupt. But I think everyone shares the goal of trying to make things better. That you have to bring that humility to everything that you do, and that know that things were there for a reason. It's funny. You reminded me of like the one example in this topic that is in the everyday too, is like when you read the back of a shampoo bottle and it says "Don't eat this," and everyone who reads that has this like feeling of superiority. They're like, "My God, people are so stupid." Like, I can't believe like we have to write don't eat this on the back of a shampoo bottle. God, like I would never eat this. Like people are so stupid. And it's funny because that is that moment of hubris and pride and arrogance that you need to fucking nip that in the bud. Because the minute that you feel like other people, like something is so beneath you and there's no way you'd be caught doing that, not realizing that you don't even know what a world looks like where that label didn't exist on the shampoo and people did fucking eat that shit, like you can't take it for granted. We live in a world right now, for example, where we take science for granted, right? And the whole thing, but you don't know what it's like to live in a world where germ theory didn't exist. Like that we didn't know that like the first microscope was invented and the guy looked at this and he was like, holy fuck, there's these little things that all around us and they spread disease, right? Like, just, you don't even know what it's like to live in a world where microbes don't exist as a construct. So like, chill out, there's a lot we don't know.
You remember that example I think in Japan, you remember Fukushima, or was that Fukushima? Or like 10 years ago when they had like the nuclear like there was like an earthquake and then there was like a tidal wave and all that stuff. Yeah. And then I think they were always talking about how there was like this hill and there was like a sign on it and it was like, do not build like below this elevation. And it was from like, like probably like a century ago, something like a long time ago. And someone it was like, do not build below this elevation. And the reason they put that sign there was because I think there was some sort of like earthquake or whatever. And then like, that's as high as the floodwaters got. So, so they were like, yo, don't build like below this elevation, because obviously we know the floodwaters can get to this point when there's a tidal wave. So, but then like over the years, people obviously, say 100 years removed or even more from that, those people didn't live through what happened when the tidal waves came in and like, took out everything below that line.
Oh my God.
And then so over time, like the lessons that were learned by the previous generation doesn't get like fully passed on, because you have to know. I mean, you can't just intellectually know. Someone was probably like, oh yeah, dude, look at this ancient sign that someone put here. Isn't that dope? So I was thinking about that example when you were talking about how you can't take like these systems for granted. You know, like there's a reason somebody put that sign there because they were like, oh shit,
Yeah.
these guys should know about it. I'm
That's a
sure
great,
I'm sure that, you know, it happens for us too when we roll up to like a, you know, like a new like job, for instance. We're probably like, yo, why the fuck are they so inefficient here? Why don't we do it like this? You know, but then
yeah.
we're probably being hypocrites, you know.
Yeah. And I love that example that you said, because it's one of those things where it might be once in a lifetime, but when it hits, like a fucking tsunami taking out, I mean, everything, right? It's very interesting. I like that example a lot. Yeah. So this is all to say that, like, I think wherever you start off, you know, be ready to like fully almost explore the complete opposite. But now know that it fits into your framework, right? I would say growing up, I was like very rebellious, anti-authoritarian, and like didn't care for what was already there. But it's like through age that, like, I mean, I think my core identity hasn't changed. Like I still try to push the envelope and change things. But now I totally know how to bring other people along for the ride, right? Like I totally understand the whole, like the diametrically opposed position, and it fits within my worldview now. It fits within the way I like want to do things and try to do things. Like I actually want to leverage it, right? Like versus like say, oh, that's just not a good way of thinking. So yeah. Oh, and you know what? Maybe we can use this as a jumping point to something that we were talking about in our pre-discussion about what it means to judge people, apply judgment, right? I mean, you can apply judgment to things, situations, circumstances, most certainly to people. But we're kind of talking about that, right? You are coming in, you're making an assessment based on what you think is accurate, and you put a lot of emphasis on your own judgment.
What does it mean to judge people?
What does it mean?
Okay, to close out the last topic, later after this pod, Google tsunami stones. That's what they're called. I just
You know,
typed that into Google real quick just to see what popped up. And they're centuries old, so it's not 100 years. It was probably like, I don't know, 500 years or something. And
oh my God.
And so like they put these stones on the hill, and it, you know, and it literally said, you know, like, hey guys, like to warn future generations. And so that's, I thought that was super interesting because I remember hearing about it, but then I never like looked into it, and I literally just like Googled it just now. So I mean, I thought that was super interesting and relatable to the topic at hand.
God, that feels like a supernatural, like fiction. Like it feels like something out of an anime.
Yeah,
The tsunami stones, you know.
tsunami stones.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're talking about judging. Okay, so yeah, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. What does it mean to judge someone? So for me, when I think about judging someone, I think about, okay, so I've always hated, or not hated, but maybe hated's the right word. I don't know. I didn't like the phrase "don't judge people" because I've always felt like you're lying to yourself most of the time. Maybe some people have like high enough awareness where they are able to judge people less. But I think the phrase "don't judge people" is it's probably a nice a nice virtue or a nice idea to like strive for, but I feel like it's misinterpreted. And the reason I say that is because I think a lot of times your mind is like this, and your human experience and your mind, all that stuff, is literally like this pattern recognizing machine, and it goes around through your experiences in life, and it recognizes patterns, and then that's what formulates like your beliefs and your worldview and your perspective and the way that you view the world. And if you go into any situation, that pattern recognizing machine will quickly assess the situation based on what it sees in front of it and give you like a this is probably what's going on 1, 2, and 3. And that's a feature, not a flaw. And it's going to do that whether or not you control that or not. Like, it's literally 100% just going to do that. And I think in that case, your mind is like kind of like judging the situation and the people within that situation. And you can't help that. It's literally doing that. So when you say don't judge people, I think a lot of times, like, you have that assessment going on in your head. Does don't judge people mean that you just don't say it? Because it's happening whether or not you say it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's almost like not delusional, but like it's almost like you probably can't not judge people on some level, so don't lie to yourself about it, but maybe, and I guess it would be a longer phrase, but maybe, like, I don't know, I'd rather people raise awareness to what's going on within themselves as
right.
opposed to, like, like this, like, nice, like, little cliche phrase of don't judge people. And I think judging people is like, through your experiences of life, through all the patterns that your mind has recognized, through all the beliefs that's built up through those experiences and patterns it's recognized, it looks at the situation and it assesses, the situation and the people within it. And sometimes that assessment is not fair. And I think that's where the phrase comes from. But at the same time, like this instrument, it's going to do its thing, whether or not you say don't judge people or not. So let's, rather than saying don't judge people, we should raise awareness on how this instrument works and understand it better and try to use it in a more effective manner than what it's automatically going to do.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you, but can I try to steel man the opposition, the opposing argument?
You can do whatever you want, bro. I'll judge you for it, though.
Yeah, you have no choice but to judge. But so for those listening, basically, steel man is a logical technique that's opposite from straw man. So straw man is a logical fallacy where, if you want to prove your point, you make an argument that seems similar to the argument that you're arguing against, but it's made out of straw, right? It's weak. So it's very easy for you to punch it down. And so it looks like you kind of made a really good point, but in fact, you like made a dummy that you could punch down. And unless people are language is very complex, right? Sometimes it can sound very convincing. So you have to be very vigilant in spotting a straw man. But the opposite of a straw man is to try to construct a steel man, right? So you have an opposing argument and you try to make the best possible version, the strongest possible version of that argument. And if you can take that guy down, then your argument is, has some more merit to it. So, but playing devil's advocate here, I definitely agree with you, but I wonder if it's just a symptom of cliches that have been misinterpreted or have just lost meaning over time. And that when people say, I think that you're right, that a lot of people get it wrong when they think that don't judge people means like don't judge. But I wonder if don't judge people goes a little bit further than that. When you think about judging, right? Like who judges? Like judges judge that people should go to jail or not. Like God judges, right? Judging is like, it's different from like, a parent like, or it's different from like figuring out what's fair and who should get what. And like, Billy gets the car Friday, Sally, sorry, because you get this. It's like there's like a moral element to it. And so maybe it's where like, yes, you can have a descriptive judgment of a person. Like, hey, this person is not honest, right? That can be a judgment. This person's dishonest. Now, it can stop there, right? It can be like, they're dishonest, okay? Like, I have to interact with this person in a different way because they're dishonest. But if you take it to its moral, and it's like, this person is a bad person because they're dishonest. And I'm better than this bad person who's dishonest. And maybe that's what people mean by not judging, is that don't start to ascribe like value because who are you to ascribe value, right? It's that Jesus thing where who hasn't sinned, like throw the first stone at the prostitute, right? Like, because if you play the game of judging others in determining moral values, you'll find yourself over your head because you're human. Like humans should not really be judging other humans like that. Who are we to do it, right? Because you could get some bad outcomes when humans start to judge other humans. Arguably, I think we're actually in that exact spot right now. But you look at some of the big genocides and persecution things over human history where self-righteousness got way out of control. Self-righteousness just went amok because people thought they were better than other people. And there was like a critical mass and a mob mentality. So I wonder if that wisdom cliche was there it's like a tsunami stone, right? Like we've seen what happens in the past when people start judging people. It gets ridiculous. So just don't start. Anyway, I just let my mind run very, very wild with that, but cheers.
Yeah, I think I mean I agree with you. A lot of times cliches lose their meaning because it's so far removed from who said it and why they said it that it's like this like bumper sticker. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, okay, well, what does don't judge others actually mean? And it could be more related to like you're not the person that decides that you're better than this person or not, as opposed to like judging people as far as like assessing who they are based on your personal worldview, or maybe a combination of both. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I just think that like people will judge or assess. And maybe assessing and judging are different things, but people will automatically assess regardless. Yeah. So I think, to me, like being unaware of that, I think it's not doing anyone any favors.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think that you kind of set the first like bookend of it, right? And I think I went really far into the opposite bookend, like God and judgment and souls and shit. But I do think the interesting middle is where we can actually spend a lot of time here, which is, okay, cool, right? You're going to judge people, you're going to assess people, right? You can't help it. Like your brain, it will immediately create a image full of value-laden associations, right? Boom. It's automatic. And then at the other end, cool. Like, but human life is equal regardless of whatever, right? That's one axiom maybe you want to throw. But I think the interesting controversial middle ground is, what actions are acceptable for you to take as a result of your assessment of somebody, right? Like, for example, if I walk down the street and I see this like homeless person who looks very menacing, and I actually have enough, it crosses this threshold of which I'm like, I'm a little bit worried about my safety if I were to get within 5 feet of this guy. Now I have a set of actions I can take, right? And I think that's where it gets interesting because I think most people would be like, okay, yeah, go across the street, walk on the other side, whatever. That's a prudent action to take for your safety. But what happens if you take that same exact kind of thing and you apply it to like the way you go in normal life, right? Like, let's say in my job, I have to select, so I'm leading a new project and I have to pick a team member to go with me. And I'm judging the set of available team members. Some of those judgments are not going to be fucking fair. But I'm like, yeah, like maybe I think this person is, and there's an implicit biases at play, don't get me wrong, right? But maybe this person I don't think is very reliable. It might be my own prejudice, might be my own bias, but I am judging them as unreliable, and therefore I'm not going to reward them for it or invite them into, you know, like a potential good situation. And I think that's where everyone societally, like, that's where everyone's like caught up right now in like systemic biases and the way the world works, because now it's like a more invisible, subtle, not life or death situation where I am maybe like compounded over time, really setting this person up to never get an opportunity and to never fucking, you know, get anything.
Well, damn, Steven, I can't believe you would do such a thing. So what I would say is the cliche "don't judge people" gets misinterpreted, and that misinterpretation makes it so that in a situation like that, if don't judge people went a little further and it was more like, okay, listen, it's not don't judge people, it's understand how your mind works in terms of assessing situations. It doesn't judge people whether or not you like it. Now you have awareness of this tool and how it works, then you can probably make a better decision in a situation like that, as opposed to being blinded or unaware to how this thing works and just being like, oh yeah, like don't judge people. Like I could totally do that. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like the unawareness of the fact that your mind is literally doing this judging based on your own personal biases, and having the awareness around that's like kind of like the first step to. I don't know where it would go in that situation, and you obviously would have to do like a whole lot more, in terms of like personal, like practices to get yourself to that level of awareness, but I think that's the first step to understanding how your mind works, and thus understanding where the judgments come from, and thus, possibly giving a fairer assessment that's more independent of just like blindly following like your judgments in a way. I don't know, man. I mean, it's
no,
a tough problem to
I
solve.
agree. Okay, so I agree, but let's try this then. So don't judge people is so fast. Don't judge people. I think what you said was very accurate, but could you package it down into something that competes with don't judge people?
I cannot.
Yeah, right. And you have to also, I think, when it comes down to like these like cliche truisms, they have to be applicable like down the entire spectrum of people, right? Up and down. I mean, I don't mean to say that life is like a vector of like higher and lower, because I think that's an implied value system too. But like, what's something that, like, imagine if you just said all of that stuff, right? And actually the person listening to it, then I was like, yeah, I still don't get it, dude. That's stupid. Just like, I mean, I don't know. I've met people like that. I don't know if you have met people like that, but you can explain like a nuanced thing, like be aware of your biases. And I'm not even sure that some of those people I've spoken to understand what a bias is. How do you like explain a bias or a prejudice to someone who's not really aware of like maybe my parents. That's a really good example. My parents are like, I don't know if I could explain the amount of self-awareness that they should have in interrogating their biases and prejudices, and why it's something you should do versus just going with your judgment.
Okay, so I mean, I could be extremely hypocritical because I'm sure I'm probably like, okay, well, my judgment, I have awareness of it, so it's better than yours. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably what's going on in my head. So I could be extremely hypocritical. It's probably one of those things where I don't know if you can fix it just by knowing it, but I think it's like the first step in talking about it. Like when someone says, "Hey, don't judge people," you tell me what that means. You know what I mean? I would probably ask that person that, okay, do you think you should be judging people? I think a lot of people would be like, some people probably say, yeah, I can't help it. But then I think a lot of people will say, no, obviously you shouldn't be judging people. It's bad.
Yeah.
Then I would say, okay, well, why is it bad? And what would happen if you didn't judge anybody?
Right.
And then I think the situation that you talked about, with crossing the street, if there's a person on one side, is a good example. So you're not going to cross the street. You're just going to judge this person because of the way they look.
Yeah.
You don't know anything about them. Why are you crossing the street? Walk right past them, see what happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you extend that to the circumstance you're talking about. Okay, fine. Crossing the street doesn't hurt anybody. Like, whatever. But what about at work when a promotion will hurt somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Then what does that mean? Like, what are you allowed to do in that situation? How do you know that your assessment and your judgment is what it is? So on and so forth. And I think what happens is, I feel like explaining something to somebody is only helpful in certain cases, but a lot of times, especially if you're talking about people that don't even understand what a bias is and the fact that they have some, they might be better served if you just ask them questions that might be more illuminating to them, like thinking about things they've never thought about before. Like, hey, where do you think the judgment comes from? Like, wait, how do you know that you should cross the street when you see this person?
Yeah.
Like, where do you think that came from? Like, I mean, obviously, like if you had like a 3-year-old, they probably wouldn't know that. But somewhere between 3 and 30, that happened. What age did it happen? What caused it to happen? Why did it happen like that? And maybe we can start asking questions as opposed to, I mean, it's kind of a cop-out answer, but I think asking questions makes it easier because you kind of put the ball back in their court and you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, this is super interesting, and I don't think we have time to go fully into this topic. But one of the things that I brought up in our pre-discussion for this pod was like examining hypocrisy of judgment, right? Where asking yourself, like, when you judge somebody, is it really something, like, you judge somebody, is it really because it's something that bothers you about yourself, and that you yourself are like, acting in this like way, which I think is super interesting to deconstruct. And it reminds me of this one vaguely, I remember reading this leadership article about very wealthy people and people like CEOs in particular, and empathy. And to your point about asking questions, because I think a lot of times we lose our empathy along the way in the ladder of success. That's the main risk. When I look at people that are very famous and very proficient, I'm like, I actually feel very compassionate for them. Like, I was like, I don't know how you get to that level. You've lost a lot of empathy to get there. I think that's just by design. But there was this one thing where apparently, like, yeah, CEOs do lack, like, there's a lot of ways that they are just kind of blind. But one thing that was very effective was asking a CEO, like, if you could remember this time where you like had to, like, didn't have money or something, right? Or where they were the victim, like asking about it. And then I think you'll find a lot of people who've made it, they remember so intensely this time where they hadn't made it, and like it was so fucking hard, right? And I think there's a door there, right? Like, in terms of, like, whenever you're talking with somebody, like, you get to choose which you want to go through, the front door, the side door, the basement door, whatever, right? Like, very rarely is the front door really the best place to go, but yeah, I think that's one of the doors is a question around when you were the victim of something, where you were not in the privileged position, to kind of evoke and transport people back to this moment where they're not going around laying judgments and they're the ones being judged. So I like what you brought up.
Yeah, when you talk about hypocrisy of judgment and whether or not the things that you judge and the things that you notice are more of a reflection of yourself, that, to me, that's a super interesting. Like, we probably could have spent the entire pod talking just about that, because you think, like, how that actually, it's kind of like self-projection. Like you're judging this person super hard on the fact that, like maybe they don't have any money or something. And it just so happens, whether you know it or not, you're really insecure about how much money you have yourself. And you're kind of like, or whatever the case may be. And I think when we were pre-discussing this on the before we started recording, I brought up the example of a lot of times, or not a lot of times, but I mean, obviously, there's been situations where like Republican elected officials, they're like extremely harsh, and I think in probably years past, maybe it's different now, like in 2022, but for sure in the last decade, there'd be Republican officials, like I think even like governors or like high ranking officials that are super hard on gay marriage policies and stuff like that. And then it comes out that they, have a second life where they're like, just like gay. They're just, they have like a secret husband or boyfriend, some crazy shit like that. And I feel like it's happened more than one time. And obviously, I'm sure every time it happens, like there's a lot of eyes on it because it's like, how could that possibly be? That dude literally doesn't even want gay people to have rights. And it, when it comes up, it's nice to talk about that in a sensationalist manner where it's like, can you believe this happened? But I think you dig one level like below and you start examining like the human as a creature and how could this possibly have happened like under everyone's eyes and everyone's like surprised, like how does that happen? Like how does the mind set itself up like that? And where something like this can even occur. I think that discussion in itself, it's really interesting because I think it shows us what we don't know about not just other people and how humans work, but for ourselves too. I'm sure there's a lot of shit I go around judging people for that I probably have deep insecurities about that I don't know about, or that I'm, I'm just like, I'm probably better than that person because so and so, like whatever. But I don't know, like putting a microscope to that, I think would be very interesting.
Yeah, man. I think it would be so interesting.
Scary too, though.
Scary, yeah. You just reminded me of something too. Something that I used to tell people. When I, so I was a psych major along with English. So English had a lot of philosophy in it, no surprise there, and all the ways that like logical fallacies come up and how to construct like experiences. But on the psychology side, it's really interesting because people would always ask me like, what did you get out of that? Like, oh man, do you like really like, know how to like understand everyone's minds and stuff like that? And I was like, and can you like manipulate people? I was like, no. You know what's the number one thing I got out of my psychology education? Was that I can't trust myself for shit. Like the amount of tricks that your mind plays on itself is insane. From the neurophysiological perspective, where it's just mechanical tricks, right? Like, oh, okay, cool. Like, your brain fills in that gap, or like there's that part of the vision that doesn't exist, so it's going to make it up or whatever, down to like the straight cognitive tricks, like we're talking about now with like biases and like not acknowledging your own homosexuality. And I think that that's probably one thing that we've just naturally spent a lot of time on this podcast, which is the power of mind, right? The mechanics of mind and what it means to kind of go through, kind of like dispel those illusions as much as you can, peer behind the curtain. Because I think it's one of those scary, you said this, the word scary. I think one of the things that's scariest for me is, even scarier than the tricks, is to like not be aware of the way that I'm tricking myself. Being caught in a delusion.
But you're not aware.
But are you?
You're not aware, so you're not scared. You know what I mean? But like when you get the microscope down and you can see, oh shit, this is what I'm scared of, and I've been hiding it like the entire time. I had no idea. I think that's scary because it's like you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you have a monster under your bed, but you don't know the monster's there, the monster's still there. But to me, that's not scary because I didn't know the monster's there. But if I was like, yo, Steven, there's a monster under your fucking bed, bro.
Yeah.
Look at it. Like, here, look under your bed. I dare you. You know, it's like, to me, like that. That's the difference between, like, you know, it goes up a whole nother notch when you like, you know, you look under the bed and there's like eyes looking back at you and shit.
There's a we got to jump off in a bit, but there's this famous psychologist intellectual who shall not be named, but he does give a lecture on this one children's book story about a dragon that it's like this little kid. Like, it's a family of a mom and a dad. It's a children's book, and it's a kid. And then like there's this like little dragon that like appears in the house. I can't remember, and the kid keeps trying to point out to the parents that this dragon is here, right? And the parents just say like, they're like, "Oh no, don't worry about it. It's not. What are you talking about? Dragons aren't real. You know that, right?" And the kid keeps going like, "Oh my god, the dragon is getting bigger," right? And each page, the dragon gets more and more, and the kid keeps like trying to tell the parents that this dragon's here, and the parents keep deflecting it. But the funny thing is that as the dragon gets bigger, it's still a real dragon because the parents are like having to move around the dragon, right? And they're still the dragon is still in their way, even though they're not admitting that there's a dragon there. And so eventually it gets comical because the dragon's so big that the mom has to like they're not even able to like really live because this dragon's in the way. But none of the adults will admit that there's a dragon there. So yeah, that's what it made me think of.
That's pretty funny. You guys send me that later.
Yeah, I'll try to find it.
The lecture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just Googled how does self-projection work. And it says, projection is a thought to be an unconscious process that protects the ego from unacceptable thoughts and impulses. Attributing those tendencies to others allows the person to place themselves above and beyond those urges while still being able to observe them from afar.
Ooh, that's an awesome freaking that's a great definition.
Yeah, it was just the top one on Google. But it's interesting because if you think about it, your entire reality is created internally. It's like an internal process, and it's literally everything you know, like builds like your experience and how you see things in the world. It gets filtered through. There's no experience that's not an internal one. I don't even know if there's like objective reality, but you know, that's another discussion. But like everything's an internal experience. So it would make sense that the things that you notice in other people, your mind's making you notice them. But why out of like the millions of things you can notice in your environment, you notice like these specific like character traits within like other people? And why are these things like things that seem to annoy you so much, or things that you like almost like pet peeves in a way for some of these things?
Yeah.
Like, why is that? You know, and if that's the case, then I don't know. And then I mean, I feel like there's something there. I don't know what's there, but it's a nice thought experiment.
That kind of gave me goosebumps, honestly, the way you just phrased that. Because I mean, at this point, you've actually connected it to a dimensional reality, right? Of where we're operating in a dimensional world where it's just things that bother us that, like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes I kind of frame reality as, again, I'm using this language from this will not be mentioned psychologist, but like, there's things that are constantly announcing themselves to you, right? Like, remember we talked about radar and like pinging? Like, there's things around you that ping themselves at you, right? And some of them just are stronger than others. So I think it's not just that like your judgments are judgments, and they actually make up your reality. Like your reality is made up of your value judgments on things. And that's the fluid that we're in. Like, that's the ocean that we're swimming in, right? It's a sea of judgments. It's other people's judgments, our judgments. That's what it is.
Yeah, man, the human mind's extremely interesting.
So
I
interesting.
wonder if the human mind creates consciousness. That's a different uh that's a different topic for sure for another day.
Yeah.
But if it does, if the consciousness plugs into the mind and that's how you experience consciousness, then it would make sense that the things that you notice in your environment that you're like kind of like drawn to, like why are you drawn to those things? I mean, I'm sure there's probably some survival mechanisms that make it so that you're, you know, more conscious of certain things than others. But what about like things you get offended about that probably don't, you know, like if I'm offended that there's like a homosexual couple over there, and that
Mm-hmm.
literally is something that literally if I turned the other way, it wouldn't even be in my reality anymore. I wouldn't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I offended about that? Not that I'm using this as an example. I don't homosexual people don't offend me. I don't want to
Yeah.
get canceled.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a lot to. I think it's let's remember this because I think this is a great like we should do a part 2 of this podcast. Like we have a lot that we can just like jump right into for the next one. So I'm trying to keep it at bay because I know we're at time, but the
Okay.
mind is
All
a
right.
crazy thing.
What is the
Title:
what is the title for this podcast?
Don't judge others.
Don't
judge
judge
others.
others.
Judge everyone. Judge everything.
Okay, yeah,
Judge as
something
much as
around
possible.
judge as much as possible.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna pick a title around judgment. I think that should be fun.
All right, man. Sounds good.
All right, I'm gonna wrap it.
All right, dude.
Until next week.
Next time. Talk to you guys later.
Yep.